Welcome to the Market Me podcast with your host, Mike Mall. Each episode of Market Me deconstructs real campaigns for actual businesses to improve their marketing efforts. Mike is the founder of Social Media House and a digital marketing consultant who teaches marketing strategy to executives and their teams from small business to Fortune 500 companies. Let's get started.
On this episode of the Market Me podcast, we're talking with Sean Campbell, CEO of Cascade Insights. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about what your company does and the space that you play in.
Yeah, sure. So the short version is we've been around since 2006. This is my second rodeo. I had a professional service firm that I grew and sold before that that lasted from 1999 to 2006. And we do basically market research and marketing services, strategy services for B2B technology companies. So think of everything that isn't sold in a Best Buy is the short answer. So like it's no consumer electronics. It's all like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, cybersecurity services. It's all that kind of stuff, the invisible technology to most people, right? And we go in and they usually have some kind of marketing or sales problem and they want us to research it. So we'll go out and research customers, prospects, that kind of stuff, and then come back and say, hey, this is how you need to change your marketing and your sales strategies and that kind of stuff. And so that's company's about 20 employees now. We don't really use a contractor model. Like a lot of services firms are kind of a mix, but like we're pretty much full-time employee based. We kind of like to grow our own. We're based out of Portland, Oregon. We've done the office thing and not the office thing. People might be curious about that. We've now are not doing the office thing. That's the phase we're in. We actually got out of it when COVID hit, and we're thriving without it. Honestly, that stuff goes in waves. Someday everybody will be back in the office for some reason. You know what I mean, to some degree. But right now we're clearly on the leave the office kind of model. And that's basically it. And I've been owning services firms for about 20 years, and I love just sharing anything I've learned along that path.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Very concise. I like it. How did you guys find the transition? I'm always curious with the work from home thing. Is it something that you guys have kind of experimented with a little bit in the past, or you guys were infrastructure wise, were you pretty set up for it to happen anyway?
Well, yeah, on the infrastructure side, we have a huge benefit that because we deal with B2B technology companies, by definition, everybody we kind of hire is kind of self-sufficient when it comes to how do I get to Outlook and how do I get my mail and how do I go find my files on Dropbox, right? I mean, we don't really have an IT team. I mean, senior leadership in the company is the one that says, here's a new account, kind of thing. So, and that's because the staff's pretty savvy that way. Culturally, it was interesting. Overall, it's been a huge positive. Part of that, I think, is half of the company was kind of mostly working virtual anyway. My marketing team was mostly virtual. They kind of like to go home and write. They come in for meetings and then they go home and write, right? And my sales team, well, they're on the road a bit, sometimes with me. So that's typical for sales team. Our research team was really in the office a lot, and that was a bigger lift to get the transition. Everybody did a really good job with it, but Scott, my business partner, his wife does a lot of the cultural work in the company, kind of like making sure everybody's connected. She's done a great job having these virtual meetups every couple weeks, times a week. She does some kind of neat activities and stuff like that. I'd say maybe the hardest thing is onboarding. We were able to transition, but you can see it in people's eyes when they're new. I really want to connect more, but how do I connect with this team, especially where they already know each other because they lived an in-person life together before? I think that's probably the thing that's the hardest right now, that we'll see how that plays out, because we all knew each other in person and had gone to lunch and done bowling and taken hikes together and done all the normal stuff you do as a fun young company. And, on the flip side, instantly we're hiring from anywhere. We just hired somebody from Maine because what does it matter anymore, right? I mean, just go ahead and do it, right? I mean, it didn't matter before in a way, but it matters a lot less. The other huge thing is we've got this great diaspora. One of the employees wanted to move back to Maryland. Fine, go back to Maryland. I don't care. I mean, works for me. Another one wanted to move to Hood River. Oregon is, a little side note, Oregon is one of those states a bit like some others where you've got Portland, an urban core, and then the rest of the state is very rural and has all these kind of cool experiences in hiking and mountain climbing and fishing. And so you have this thing where most people have these kind of times in their career where they're like, I want to live urban in Portland, and then they're like, I got a good job, I want to move out. And so we got one guy living in Montana now, skiing every day, basically during the winter, and working for us, right? We got another crew that moved out to Hood River. We got somebody else that moved out to Bend. And all that stuff would have been a lot harder to say yes to, even though it wouldn't have really changed anything, but it just felt like it would have been harder to say yes. And so from a satisfaction standpoint, I think we've got a lot of young employees who are like, this is awesome. I can go live wherever I want for a couple years, you know?
Yeah.
So I think overall for us, it's been really good. I would say it's a net positive.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I've been fully remote for 7 years. My we've always been remote. We've had, I've had my kind of home office podcast recording studio when we were still in Toronto, but people would come every once in a while. We'd all kind of get together. But yeah, it's been, the amount of phone calls that I get from friends that are like, have you heard of Slack? We're doing Slack now. I'm like, yeah, I've been on Slack.
Yeah. No, I would say that one of the things that you have to keep in mind, like there are a few things that I think we were kind of doing before, but that got amplified, is like communication protocols. Like just recently we set something up where everybody in the company knows, hey, I won't name names, but head of whatever likes to be communicated with email first, then hit them with a message in Teams, then phone call them, then text them. Or somebody else might be like, I hate my email. Please send me a message in Teams, right? I hate my email. Or somebody else might be, hey, I don't care if you text me, right? And then you got somebody else who's like, text to me are my friends and family. I never want to be texted by you, kind of thing, right? And so setting up some of that kind of stuff is really, really helpful because you can have people, and I, again, won't name the name, but we had an employee recently who didn't actually communicate with anybody for a couple weeks when in Teams the light was red that they were busy. And that shows up even if your just calendar's full, kind of thing. And because in their old job, the protocol was don't message anybody when their busy's on. And that's not our protocol. So there's things that you have to communicate that would have easily been handled in the hallway in 2 seconds. That same person would have said, hey, can I message people? Is it okay? And then when they're remote, it's like it feels really awkward to ask that in the same way. So I think at management, you have to do a lot of patrolling that and very proactively reaching out to staff and saying, are you having trouble communicating? Is there something you're unable to access? Because it's very hard to jump through the Zoom chat and say, boss, I don't know how to do this. Whereas in the hall, that feels a little easier, Yep. And so I think it's more of you got to reach out and ask these people these things a lot. And I don't know if people do that well all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting to just kind of give people almost like a chart of like, here's Mike's number 1, 2, and 3 methods of communication. Cause you're right. I mean, for me, I get texts from clients all the time and I'm like, send this to my inbox. I'm not responding here. I just won't. Right. Because for me, it's like, we need a record of what's going on, especially when we're dealing with marketing budgets. If they're like texting saying, hey, throw $10,000 more at this.
Right. That doesn't work. Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Like, oh yeah, you texted me.
Right. And for me, it's like, I got 6 direct reports right now, plus I'm a CEO and I got the whole company to kind of pay attention to at times. So I tell people, do not give me a task in Teams. It just scrolls by. It is now and yeah, for all of you listening who are team geniuses, I know I can flag it and pin it and all that other stuff, but like I'm a 50-year-old dude who likes my email, right? So I want you to send me an email, right? And I want to flag it in email. And I think it's that kind of communication that really helps when you're virtual. So
yeah, I think about it the same way. Like we used to use the project management tool Asana. I'm like, I tagged you in a task in Asana. I'm like, I'm not checking Asana.
No, and we use that too. Yeah. That's a great tool. And I have to do the same thing. My team will tag me with stuff and I'm like, no. You got to hit it to me. And it's not like, I'm the boss, you have to morph to me. That's not the point. It's just like when you have muscle memory and workflows that work for you for 15, 20 years, I think it's a little crazy to tell people to not use their workflow. Like we can just notify everybody what our workflows are and we can figure it out. It's not rocket science.
Exactly. And so the types of it sounds like you work with a pretty wide range of business types.
Yes and no. Meaning our client base is all business-to-business companies, and they will be technology companies of some kind, meaning
only
they
SaaS?
have
Is it specific to SaaS though?
Well, that's what I was going to clarify. So, like, it's interesting when my whole life, because I've done a lot of tech sector work my whole life, and when you say tech to people, it's interesting because the frame is always based on kind of what they know, which makes sense. Like if you say tech to a young kid in high school, it's the Xbox and it's his phone and it's the TV and whatever, and yet at the same time, tech is much broader than that. So for us, tech is, again, things that are on the back end. It's like cloud services, so it would be SaaS. It would be infrastructure that runs in like a data center. But it would also be technology that might support a medical practice, or technology that might support an oil and gas refinery, right? You know, so what it boils down to is at some point it's software or hardware. That's what we deal with. Like, and where that gets interesting for an example, right? If Boeing called us and said, hey, jet engines are technology too, I would say yes, absolutely. But we do not have aerospace engineers here. We do not know how to help you. So you know, or SpaceX comes calling. I would love to work for SpaceX, but outside of enjoying SpaceX, we don't have any context that we could apply to work we do for them. So that's how we draw the line.
Okay, got it. So one thing I love to find out from people, because this is always such a diverse answer, is how two parts. The first part is how do you think about marketing? And the second part is kind of like, what are the channels that you actually focus on? And like, what's the best, generator for you from a marketing standpoint?
I have two things I say a lot about marketing that I think are universally applicable, because obviously some stuff is unique to us. Kind of like the second part of that question is, you know, what do we uniquely focus on, right? Which has more applicability directly to who we are. But on the front end, I'd say the two biggest failings and the two things I tell people all the time are say no more, and then this other thing called the age of narrow that I keep saying. And I'll unpack either one briefly, and then we can spend more time on them if you want. But like, by saying no, most marketers are driven by the creativity of the idea more than the direct applicability. And so the challenge there becomes, can you make your marketing team focus on kind of the things that really drive business, like leads and revenue and that kind of stuff? So that's one part of saying no. But the bigger part that relates to the age of narrow is, as one guy told me in HP once, this is early in my business career, and I was talking to him and we're trying to get this project to go with him, and I'm like, yeah, and we do this and we do that, and he said this, and I said, yeah, and we could do that, right? You know, like people say, you know, the word could is a really dangerous word if like you own a business, right? Because it's like you already tell that they're expanding with, you know, and he said to me, he said, I know you're trying to keep the aperture wide open. And right at that moment, I was like, oh, I have failed, right? Like, I mean, he's basically telling me, I see, young Padawan, what you're trying to do, right? And this guy was like a VP at HP, right? And it stayed with me for years. And so historically, we have actually done a lot of saying no in our marketing. We're like, right up on our pages, we'll be like, we don't serve this. We don't serve that. We don't do this. We don't work with this type of customers. Even when talking to you at the beginning, I'm like, this is what we don't do. You know what I mean a lot? Like, we don't do consumer tech. And the reason I think that's so important, and the ties to the age of narrow, is everybody likes narrow stuff now. I don't mean narrow-minded. We don't need more of that. But, like, there's narrow in, like, I like my Netflix queue. I like my Spotify queue. I actually am in love with 70s disco, and I get to listen to it all I ever want, right? You know what I mean? 20 years ago, the only time you could listen to 70s disco is when you happened to find a radio station that happened to be playing 70s disco, right? So, like, everybody's so narrowly focused, and yet marketers try to leave the aperture open. They're like, there's this inherent tension where it's like, and if you say no, the other huge thing it does, and if you just keep saying it, like, this isn't who we serve, this isn't what the kind of offering we have, and sure, you're going to say what you do, but lead with the no. It's implicit trust. You cannot convince someone with kind of like just additional explanation and proof points in nearly the same way as by saying, let me tell you the 4 things we don't do first. And we lead our sales process that way. We lead our marketing process that way. And everybody says the same thing. They're like, what a breath of fresh air. I actually know what you don't do. I don't have to guess. I don't have to worry if you just added this thing 3 days ago and you don't really know what you're doing yet, kind of thing. And that's not to say you can't expand your business. That's fine. But even in that context, put some guardrails around it. And so, say no a little more, and think about that narrow focus that people really like, and it makes everything easier. Cost of customer acquisition is easier. You get higher performing content. You don't have to produce as much content. To be honest, it's more fun content to put together, because it feels focused. Writers love writing focused content. They hate writing stuff that's like to everybody, right? That's no fun for anybody, right? So all of it is virtuous, but where that starts, to finish this off, is it comes from leadership. Because leadership will always have this temptation when a new lead comes in or a new client, especially if they're big, to be like, well, we could, we could work for Boeing. There's a lot of computers in a jet. SpaceX, there's a lot of software in there. I know they're asking about the rocket engines, but we could, and the same thing's true too on the sales process side, is that I've probably won more business long term by telling a client no than I've ever done by yes. Like just simply even early days, yeah, you're not a fit for us. And then 3 weeks later, he comes back with 4 leads that are a fit for us. Because it's just that trust that people lack these days. So anyway, that's some of the initial thoughts.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think people have a really hard time doing it. And myself included, it took me quite a while. And I think there's definitely still areas for me to improve. But the idea of, if I'm not catering to some particular thing, am I going to miss out? Am I ever going to make that money? Where is that going to go? Why can't I have it? And so it's a tricky thing to wrap your head around. But I do agree. And since I've tightened my stuff up over the past couple of years, especially with our training products specifically, the process is easier. The success rate is way higher. And you can just be so much more confident about it, which is great.
Well, and if you have plans for world domination, not necessarily you, maybe you do, I don't know, you know what I mean? But if somebody does, fine. Have separate practice areas in your business that are clearly delineated, in your marketing copy, and it shows this is the leadership of this area. They have context, they have experience, or even spawn separate businesses, right? That's not the most complicated thing in the universe, right? But you're going to benefit from that buyer's journey, having all of this really deep context that's just about those buyers. And then, like I said, over time, everything gets easier. In the very beginning, though, you're right. There's stuff you're going to miss out on. And if you're a new business, and you're like, gosh, I really need that 10K. I just got to tell you, you're gonna like it a lot better. It's like your retirement income. If you just wait and just go focus for that next year, you're going to feel much, much better in the end. But from a referral standpoint, you can charge more also to clients where you feel like you have a lot of context. So all of it gets better if you can just get through that first couple years. Yeah,
it's a great insight. It makes a lot of sense. I wish I had known that when I started.
Well, like I said, everybody does it to some degree. Yeah. And remember, I had a first business too. So here's the other way people go wrong. And this is my problem in my first business. You stay too focused on one incredibly narrow area because it's just too easy. This is the classic case of you get one big account. In our case, it was Microsoft. And Microsoft in 2000 was as cool as Google is now. Microsoft people weren't as cool as Google people. To be honest, Microsoft is not known as a cool brand and probably never will be. But no offense to all the Microsoft people that I know, but the truth is I think they know this already. So we just threw ourselves into that account in the first business. And then we did the same thing with Intel. But then they were the only 2 accounts we had.
Right.
We were $2 million in revenue, 25 employees, and so it is possible to go too narrow. And what happens there, I think, is that that's the case where the business is not spending any money on marketing. They're just focused on kind of referral and word of mouth, and nobody's really thinking about the sales process strategically. And that's a different kind of no. There's a blog post on our site that says the answer is still no, and it's just about strategic account management. And all it says is, if you talk to every business owner, any small business owner, I've just found this to be universally true. You'll say, hey, where do you get your business from? And they'll be like, we've got a few big accounts. And if you really could see their accounting system, that's usually 75% of their revenue. Like they always say, like, there's a few big accounts, right? Yeah. And it takes a lot of discipline to be like, no, Microsoft, as big as you are, you get 15% of my P&L. Right. And for the time that I don't have work from you, I'm going to go find other work. And that's a super hard thing to do. And what I'm saying is in our first business, we didn't do it as well. We did okay. We thrived for a while. But part of the reason I got out is we built a business that was just so locked in on those two accounts. And it left me with nightmares because it'd be like, what if they have a problem with the vendor database, or they're like, we're culling vendors or whatever. It's like that's insanity.
Game over.
So now, it's game over, right? And so anyway, that you can go wrong the other way, but I'd say the failing I see in modern marketing more often than not is they leave the aperture so wide open, the average prospect goes, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust you.
Yeah, I heard a quote last November that really, really, really stuck with me that I think is really relatable. And it's that people don't buy when they understand you, they buy when they feel understood. And I think, if you're focused and if you're narrow, your literature and your marketing, your materials are going to be talking to the person. And they're going to be like, holy smokes, like they know what our problems are. And it sounds like what they're talking about is the thing that will actually fix it. This is what I've been thinking about. And so having that narrow focus in all those facets makes that transaction way easier. Way easier.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like we spend a lot of time, if people saw our edit loops on content, a lot of it is, we try not to be, obsessive about it that drives people crazy internally, but like it's, hey, that phrase, it's not how the clients say it, right? We really try not to do the whole like post another listicle every 5 minutes that like everybody does, right? You know what I mean? That like ranks well, but the minute somebody hits it, they're like, just like you said, it's not how I talk. That's not really my business problem. That's not really my job to be done. I should go look and see if I can find somebody who talks about mine, Yeah. And then it makes everything easier at that point.
Yeah. So then, and those are really good philosophies. So kind of onto the second part, how do you, what is your biggest focus area for marketing of yourselves? Is it LinkedIn? Word of mouth, what's your big driver?
Yeah, it's interesting. So for us, basically, I'm trying to think of the best way to break this down. So let me talk about stuff we don't do. Maybe that's the first place. So like Instagram, we have an active account, but it's mostly to show company culture. Yes, there is B2B activity on Instagram, but it's relatively narrow. We did our own research on our own. It's one of the benefits of owning a research firm. We did a big survey of our own customer base, and they were like, no, I'm not searching for a vendor on Instagram, at least for professional services for B2B. I'm just not doing it. Yeah. But culture-wise, there's good stuff there. And we've got some budding photographers in the company, so there's some good stuff. And Oregon's full of great scenery, so go take a look at it if you want good photos. So LinkedIn, honestly, is a cesspool. I hate to say it. It is. There was an era about 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago, that time frame, where LinkedIn groups were a great target, where the main news feed wasn't just flooded, like absolutely like 3,000 feet of water of posts, you know what I mean? And it's hard to get through the noise. And our clients have kind of turned it off too. They're like, yeah, I go in there when I'm looking for a job or when I want to connect, but I'm not really going there to learn. There was this narrow window where LinkedIn was a place to go learn, and they kind of jumped the shark, LinkedIn did. I think they completely messed it up, honestly. And Microsoft now owns some of that, not to knock Microsoft again. I should quit knocking a big account, right? But but I got to tell them truth, right? It's got to say no. So it's not a place to go learn anymore. It's really not. It's just a place to get bombarded and get a job. So that doesn't really work. Twitter doesn't work for us because, again, we polled our base and they're like, yeah, I go to Twitter to look about, I was going to say something about the debate that happened 2 days ago, but I won't. I think America all knows how we feel about the debate. Let's just put it that way. And so anyway, I don't go there for businessy stuff. That's not really what I do. And yeah, you can have a cultural account, like Wendy's has that hilarious Twitter account they've run for a long time, but that's a consumer brand, right? So all this stuff got crossed off. We'd love to do more video, but that's a little more expensive for us. That would be definitely cool, and we've dabbled in that. We tend to stay pretty laser focused on pay-per-click, which works a lot better than I think some professional services firms think it does. But it's going to go back to context, and we can come back to that. And then a lot of good, really SEO work. And we get the bulk of our leads come in through organic and through paid, and that's basically it. So my marketing team will probably listen to this at some point, and so I want to say this in a way that they know I love them, but yeah, they also know I can be really difficult about, so why are we in social media at this level? In other words, it's that tension to kind of spawn another channel because it feels creative and interesting.
Right.
And you're kind of bored of writing the blog posts and you're bored of writing the ads. But it's like, if that's what's working, and I'm not saying my team's bored of it, they're a great team, but I'm saying in general, your average marketer can get very quickly, even your average owner can be like, another blog post? I got to write another one? I'm going to go make a video, right? And you got to spend real time there. And so, and one last thing on the pay-per-click that really works for us is, so a lot of the stuff, we hired a few pay-per-click agencies, right? And I'm sure there's one that would have been better out there. It was really fascinating to me. Every time we hired one, they were all about SEOizing the pay-per-click. Right? They're like, well, put the keywords there and put this there and put that there. And I'm like, okay, but we're not selling hair dryers on Amazon. This is not like, you know what I mean? Or beauty products, or pick your thing. What I did, and this was really just instinct, is I said, okay, well, with everything else, if we make it narrow and we use their words and we make it a little pithy and maybe even slightly a little negative, oddly enough, because the negativity in a way leads to trust in some weird way. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you what's wrong. I'm not going to just tell you what's right. Most of our pay-per-click doesn't stuff the keyword in it. It's like the client's voice, or it's a saying clients say, or it's a way they relate, and all that stuff gets clicked way more. And it's interesting because if you look at the quality score, AdWords is telling me this is wrong, this won't work. But what's happening is people go to the page and they're looking at 4 ads and they're all like market research, and then this other one says, we only work with Titans, blah, blah, blah. But, there's something very different about the ad.
Right.
And they go through. And then they hit the website and it's all about them. And so I think there's some things where we're too focused on generalizing the marketing approach to these best practices. And sometimes they're not really applicable to us. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question, but that's how we go about it.
No, it doesn't. And I, for me, I'm huge on pay-per-click. I've spent a boatload of money for customers on it. And I think it's still to this day, one of the most cost-effective, despite the cost per click. I was doing telecom pay-per-click at $27 a click, but the conversion rate was out of control and they were super profitable. It's well, $27 is not too much for a click then. If it's profitable.
Right. No, right. Exactly. Our average project size is $33,000.
Right. So there you go.
What do I care if the click is $10? I mean, sure, they don't all convert, but at the end of the day, right, I don't really care. And go ahead.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you don't follow the best practices, your quality score goes down, your cost per click goes up. But again, if that's what's bringing the conversion, then.
Right. That's the thing. It's all about the conversion at the end, right? And so, so it's been an interesting ride with pay-per-click. And the last thing I'd say about pay-per-click is that, look, go read Google's earnings transcript if you haven't, if you're a listener. This is a company that makes all of its money off ads. And so I say that because Google will always try to make those ads perform for you. Even the recent changes where they made the little ad icon really, really small, and things. So I've heard people say, well, people ignore them. They don't click them. I don't click them, they say, right? I'm like, No. Because most people, they go to the search and they don't really even know. I'll tell you another data point on that. Like, we ask people all the time. I find this fascinating, both as a researcher and a marketer, right? We ask every lead, and this is like, I'm passionate about this with my sales team, and I really think everybody should be. I know it's harder to do in a bigger company, but I'm religious about it. Sales, the first question when they get on with a lead is, how did you find us? They're not allowed to ask any other questions unless they ask it. And I know other organizations get a little squishy about that, and they're like, well, Bob doesn't like to ask that question. No, Bob needs to ask that question. And so it's fascinating. I've been on calls myself, happens over and over again. The client says, yeah, I found a link to you guys. Do you know if it was an ad? No. Can you tell me what it was? I'd say like 50% of the time, people in their head think they clicked an organic link.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. They actually think they clicked a blog post, even if the ad didn't even go to a blog post.
Right.
Like, it's this weird mental coding, kind of like, I don't want to tell the world I clicked an ad. Like, I'm better than that, I guess.
1,000%.
Or something.
1,000%. No, I hear it all the time.
Yeah, so that's where you have to swim upstream sometimes from like what people are actually saying and like go. And the reason I knew it was an ad, probably similar to you, when they told me what it was, I was like, well, that copy's only in an ad.
Right.
That's the only place it is. So I know that had to be the ad, right?
And we don't rank for that keyword organically. So there you go.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Yeah. We're like on page 27 for that keyword. So there's no way we got there, but we happen to be the first ad because I was willing to pay a little more per click and not care as much about the quality score when I wrote the ad, and yet it was converting, which is all that really matters in the end.
Have you ever heard of ClickSees, by the way? Do you use it?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Worthwhile investment. It's going to save you an insane amount of money, and you'll love me forever for telling you. So
okay, awesome.
ClickSees is something I stumbled on about 4 years ago. I called all of the testimonials that they had on their website to be like, is this legit? What do you think? They put you on the website. So what's your opinion on it? I called every single one of their customers and they were like, love it. Best thing that's ever happened. Love it, love it, love it. So what it does is
how's it spelled, by the way? Just because we can do this. It's the modern era. I'm going to look it up while we're talking.
Yeah. So it's Click, CLICK, and then CEASE, like to seize up. So what it does is it monitors if it's a robot click or if it's a competitor click or if it's a repeat person coming back to the ad to try and push budget. So I use it on every single account. And on average, so at the end of a month, it will post back to Google saying, hey, we think this amount of money that was spent is fraudulent or fake or robot clicks. And Google's like, okay. And if whatever the amount they agree to, they credit your account.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. This is super cool. Yeah.
You will earn back 15 to 20% of your monthly ad spend with it every month. It's ludicrous.
I like it. I like it. This is good. Plus, they have a very cool graphic on the homepage, by by the way. The little sheep with the computers. No one listening to this will know this till they go there. But their homepage graphic is hilarious, by the way.
Right. Nice. I use it for every single account, and we get credits like for every single account every month. Every other month, we get credits on the account from Google because there's just a certain level of whatever. And if you're paying $10 a click, you'll get, you'll probably be getting between 10 and 20 clicks back a month, I would guess. And I think the software is like $100, so it's like super ROI positive. Yeah.
No, I'll totally check it out.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think we were going to talk about a bit of a different topic, but I think we dove into some really good stuff, and there were some really practical takeaways in terms of, positioning the product, talking about marketing. And so I think that's a great place to leave it. And so I really enjoyed it and appreciate you coming on. If somebody is interested, if they own the type of business that you service, SaaS or technology, and they need some research done or they need help, I guess it's research around kind of product and buyer personas, is a little bit of everything.
Well, yeah, it's basically if you've got a marketing or a sales problem and you're a B2B technology company, we can help you either with the research or enablement, like either way. That's basically it. So if you're in that lane. And if folks want to get a hold of me, they can either go to cascadeinsights.com and just hit hello at, or my email is pretty fairly out there on the web, so I'm not giving any secrets away. So it's just Sean, SEAN, at CascadeInsights.com. And thanks for having me on. Very, very much appreciated.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much, and good luck.
Thanks a lot.